Hello everybody, I'm Avian and we are going through how to make a Stardew Valley mod using my garden cottage mod as an example as we go. Today we will be going over crops, so I'm going to start with how I started making the crop and walk you through all the steps. So to start off, you will need to make your sprites. You're going to need to make 2 sets of sprites. If you don't have an object sprite, you will need to make an object sprite page. Because that is where your seeds packet, your full-grown crop will go. And if you are making a crop that has additional colors, such as the tulips, or in my case, the marigolds, on that sprite page in the square directly next to your full-grown crop, you will need a black and white version of the part that you want to change color. So in my case, my petals are going to be a variance of oranges and yellows. The white on your petal or section that changes color, the white will correspond to the lightest portion of your flower or crop, where the darkest grays will be the darker color of your crop. So you can kind of see how my petals correspond. The next thing you will want to do is make a crops sprite sheet if you haven't already. For these, you will need 2 sections of seeds, followed by the stages for your crop, followed by, if you're doing the color variant, your black and white version for your petal colors. I don't know that they have a limit on phases, but I believe the most I have seen is about 5. You can always look at the vanilla crops for an example to confirm and use those as a reference when you are making your crop phase sprite sheet. So you can get a feel for how that will look. The next bit we want will be to load our sprite sheets into the game. Your objects and crop textures are very similar on the load-in. You have your section with the curly brackets per thing. You will have a log name with what you want to keep track of, because if there's an error, will be what it calls and tells you in the log where the error is. Your action is going to be load. Your target is going to be mods / mod ID / and then the name that you will target for your asset. For objects, I have just put objects, and for crops, I have put TGC for the garden cottage _ crops. And then the last bit will be the from file with the colon, and then it will be your file path followed by your file name. And don't forget to close your bracket and put a comma at the end for your next section. So that's really all you need to do to load in, and you're going to want to remember this bit where you named your asset because you will need that later. Once your sprites are set up and loaded in, you will go to your objects page, and you're going to set up 2 objects, one for your seeds and one for your full crop. Let me get to where I have those set up on my page. Up at the top. I did it above the apple tree. There it is. There's my seeds. So this, we have done another object video, and there is the modding object wiki page if you need more information on these. But a few things to remember on these is that you will be naming your object here, and this is going to be the exact name you will need in your growth code, which we will cover in a second. So you're going to want to make sure to be consistent on your naming and have it be the same in both places. Your category, your type, and your category are going to be very specific depending on the type of crop you're making. So for your seeds, you will need type seeds and category -74. And typically for price, you will want your seed price to be lower than your crop price. And don't forget, when you do your Sprite index, you start from 0. So your very first Sprite in your Sprite asset page will be 0, and then go 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. My seeds in this case, because we are starting at 0, fall in spot 18 instead of 19. For edibility on seeds, since seeds are not usually edible, you will want to set it at -300 because that is what determines that the farmer can't eat it at all. And then, of course, the rest of these are fairly standard, and you can look at the chart on the mod page to know what they do. The same thing with setting up your crop is you're going to want to remember this exact crop name that you set up and use it later. Your type and category are going to be determined by the type of crop you're creating. So if you go to modding, I believe it is the modding items page, at the bottom we will have this chart here, and it's kind of in the middle lower half. You will see it will say seed, vegetable, fruit, flower, forage, and then over on the left-hand side, you have your value column. So seeds would be 74, vegetable will be 75, fruit will be -79, flower will be -80, and forage items will be -81. And you will want to be sure that you use those values in that listing for your category. And on the crop, you will want the type to be set to basic. Again, your Sprite index starts from 0 when you're counting. And then on crops, if you're making crops that have a color change aspect, say like flowers with the different colored petals, you will want to set this color overlay from next index to true. And what that is saying is that the next Sprite sheet index number over is where your black and white thing is, and that is going to take the color index we set in our growth information and overlay it over this so that it becomes the colors that you have set, and it's kind of a randomized chance for whether it's whatever colors you have chosen. Again, I have chosen to make mine various shades of yellow and orange. So now we'll go down to the end where I've set up my crop data. This is where the data is for actually making your crops grow. You're going to start with a set of curly brackets, open and close, and all your information is going to go inside. You will have your log name for adding. Sorry, I just realized I want to change this. I'm just going to change it to add crops because you can add multiple crops with the same add crops section of code. Your action is going to be edit data. Your target is going to be data/crops. Then we're going to have an entries field, which is entries, followed by the colon, followed by a curly bracket. And again, it's an open and closed curly bracket always. And all of your crop setup information is going to go inside this entries field. I currently only have one crop set up, but if I wanted to have multiple, I could. I would simply put a comma after the closing bracket on my first section for the crop and add the next crop section. Your crop section setup. This is why I was saying you need to remember the names of your objects, because you're going to use the same name here as you named your seeds. So in my case, it is mod_ID_marigold seeds, both here and up at the top where I set up the object. So I've got that highlighted. VS Code will show you that it is up here. It is exactly the same. You will then, of course, do your colon and another set of curly brackets. And this is the set of curly brackets where all my marigold seed information is going to be contained. So per crop, you're going to want to set up the following. We will have seasons, plural, followed by a colon, followed by a set of square brackets. And inside these square brackets, each season you want your crop to grow in will go inside its own set of quotes. So I currently have just summer. If I want to add a second season, I will add a comma, a space, a set of quotes, and say I wanted it to be fall, I would do fall. And that would allow my crop to grow during summer and fall. I currently only just want summer, so I'm going to take fall out. And then I will close my square brackets. Days in phase is going to be how many days your crop spends in each one of these growth stages. So in this case, I have, count 1, 2, 3, 4 growth stages and a final fully grown Sprite. So I have that set to 1 day, followed by 2, 2, 2, and a 1. Each of these values is separated by a comma and a space. So my crop will grow over the course of 8 days with 5 different growing sprites. And those are all contained inside that set of square brackets, followed by a comma. Regrow days, right here, is if you want your crop to regrow after the first harvest. You can set the regrow days to a value. 0 would regrow on the next day. A 1 would skip and grow every other day, and so on. The -1 I have set because I do not want my crop to regrow. I want it to be harvested, and then you'd have to plant something else. So that is how regrow days worked. Is raised, I have set to false because it is not a trellis crop. If you want your crop to grow on a trellis like the grapes or green beans do that the farmer can't walk through, you would set that to true. Is a paddy crop would be something like rice, where if you plant it next to the water, it can water itself within those spaces. So you would set that to true if it's something like rice. Since mine is not, it is set to false. Needs watering is typically defaulted to true for most crops. I think the only crop I can think of that doesn't need watering in the vanilla game would be your fiber seeds. So if you're making something wild like that, you might want it set to true. Harvest item ID will be the same ID you set up for your fully harvested crop. It'll be exactly the same. So in this case, it is mod_ID_marigold. And I'll go back up and I'll show you that it is exactly the same as my finished marigold. So once it's harvested, it turns into that and goes into the player's inventory. Texture, just like we set up with our texture, you'll notice that the end piece here is exactly the same spelling as the end piece here. However, our syntax is a little bit different. It's going to be mods. It's going to be a double backslash, not a single forward slash. You'll look between and you see those are different. So it's a double backslash, followed by mod ID, followed by another double backslash, followed by the name we gave to our crop texture right there. I don't know why it's double backslash instead of a single forward slash. Somebody who understands the code aspect of it can explain better. If you're one of those people, please kindly post the answer in the comments. Sprite index I have set to 0 because this is the first sprite on my sprite sheet. You will set that to whatever placement your sprite row is. And then for tint colors, this is where I set the colors for my yellow and orange overlay on that white flower petal portion. Each of these is a hex value. You put them inside a set of quotes and you separate them with a comma and a space. All of your hex values is going to go inside this set of square brackets so it stays together. Finding your hex value is fairly straightforward. You have a little bit on the color chart over in your items thing, but you can also always just search for a hex value chart. And if you go to image search, you will find a number of charts available for use. So what it is it will be a set of 6 values, 2 for red, 2 for green, 2 for blue, and each set of numbers or colors, when it's strung into the set of 6, represents a separate hex value. So you can search for one of these charts. You find one that's a little bit easier to read. So for example, you can see this is your color, and then here is your set of values, and you have your pound sign, which starts it out as your hex. It's like a, when it sees that pound sign, it knows it's about to read a hex code, followed by these, and that will indicate which color you want. So you can always search for the charts. So you could just Google search for one of those charts. You can search for it by like hex value, color yellow, and get a range of yellows if you want, which is how I got these. The other thing you can do is most art programs, if you have something like, I think Paint will do it. Those computers come with Paint nowadays. If you choose your color picker, yes. So I can choose a value, and in Paint, this top row there shows me the hex value of that blue that I currently have selected. Most art programs have a value reader somewhere in their color palette selector that you can pull that code from. I went to Paint because I believe most computers have a version of Paint somehow, so you can always get your color value there as well. So after that, you just make sure all of your bracket sets have been closed, that each line is ended with a comma, and you should be ready to test. One note on testing is you may need to play multiple days and watch your sprite grow so that you can go from planting to harvest and see the full pattern of Sprite, just to make sure everything is growing correctly. I hope you all found that information helpful, and until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.